So this pretty surprising news just dropped where apparently Christian Bale might end up in the MCU. I think he's in talks right now. But there is talk of Christian Bale being in Thor Love and Thunder. Have you heard about this?
I have. I did see the headlines for it, and it excites me a lot to see that Disney is just like, hey, you're a movie star. Come on, work for us. Ha 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 ha.
Man, that the mouse will bring in anybody. I I don't know, man. I'm kind of surprised to see somebody like him, who I think is more gritty and emotional and kind of does more grounded. I think roles go for something like this, where I think if you want to be in a Taika Waititi movie, you know you're gonna have fun and it's gonna be a little weird. It just, I don't know. I don't know who he's gonna be, and I really don't know that the internet has any idea either, because I don't think anybody knows any of the Thor supporting characters that have not been in a movie so far.
No, I have no idea. And as someone who doesn't keep up with the comic book universe, genuinely I'm genuinely surprised they grabbed him, and I'm curious as to see what or who he's gonna play.
Yeah, so there's three names that I think, I don't know, and I have very limited speculation here, but three names that I could maybe see him being. The first, which is I think getting tossed around the most, being Beta Ray Bill, which is basically Horse Thor.
But he's a beta, John.
He's a
Christian Bale
beta.
is an alpha. Please, let's be honest.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah, so Horse Thor, potentially. But I mean, there's already going to be Jane Foster's Mighty Thor. So do we need three different Thors rolling around? But
Maybe.
speaking of, I mean, maybe there's going to be a lot of Thor. So the next name that I think maybe would be if he could potentially play Donald Blake, who is a doctor in the MCU. He was already mentioned by Jane as being an X. He was that quick little cameo, or the quick little nod in the Easter egg, when in the first Thor movie, Thor holds up his ID that he got from Jane, and the name is Donald Blake. But in the comics, he's Thor's human persona before he gets hold of the hammer. What might be kind of cool about that is if they go full Jane Foster Mighty Thor. In the comics, she's got breast cancer, and when she's obviously getting treated for it and recovering, but when she takes hold of Thor's hammer and becomes Thor, her chemo basically goes away and stops working, and the breast cancer spreads, and so every time she becomes Thor, she gets closer and closer to death.
Oof.
Which might bring, it might be that kind of story that entices Christian Bale, where it's a little bit more dark, a little bit more intimate and emotional. But I don't know. After seeing Ragnarok, I don't know what kind of direction Taika Waititi is going to go in from there, or how dark he wants to get with this
Well,
sequel.
I just don't. I don't see the mouse throwing money at Christian Bale to play like this side character. You're gonna give Christian Bale. You gotta get if you're gonna give Christian Bale a role in this movie, it's got to be something like I would think Beta Ray Bill as being like another Thor. It can't be just some like doctor. He's a fantastic actor, and I am really excited to see this type of actor, this one in the craft, someone who's hot right now as far as like commodities to have in movies. He's been in a wonderful amount of films. He's done superhero before, so is this role really surprising? Like you said, like I'm surprised they got this. I'm not 100% surprised, but I'm intrigued because this is the first person of the craft to really enter the MCU. Although you could say Anthony Hopkins, but not in a leading role by any means. So yeah, my money's on Beta Ray Bill.
Yeah, and so there's one more name that I don't think has really gotten tossed around much, and I'd be really interested to see if they did this. But there's a character that just came out in the comics recently, called Gore the God Butcher, and his whole character, he's from this alien race. He was basically like a normal type of person, that prayed to the gods when his people basically were becoming like, I don't know, like wiped out slowly. Basically, he prayed to the gods every day for their help, and obviously nothing ever came of it. And so eventually, after seeing enough of his people die out, he said, if I ever get into a position of power, I'm going to go and just wipe out all the gods for failing us. And eventually, he got this basically all-powerful sword that has a whole other history in the comics and whole other direction with symbiotes. Anyways, so once he got this sword, he became powerful enough to go out and just kill all the gods. And so he just went around slowly knocking them out one by one. And it took Thor, it took Jane Foster's character, a bunch of other people to go and just tag team him basically and knock him out. So he could go full villain in this. And Gore, I think, would be a really interesting character to add a little bit more human-esque, like grounding him a little bit more, I guess, and having this really dark and depressing backstory.
I changed my mind. My money's on Gore. My money is on Gore. Give me villain Christian Bale.
Oh God,
That's
I could
what
see
we
it
want.
so
It's
hard.
what we need so badly. Is villain Christian Bale? No, back up. Make him Galactus. I don't care.
just go full, just crazy with it. Make him Galactus.
Make him Galactus, and then make Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know what Galactus' sidekick is.
The Silver Surfer.
Sure, let's make all these method actors. Let's make all these method actors the villains, and watch them do terrible things on set to people.
Oh my gosh.
Vaporize. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Summon Up Podcast. This is where we talk about movies, shows, games, and whatever the heck we want. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. I am joined by my good friend John, and I'm Chris, and we are your co-hosts for the day. John, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Chris?
Man, last night was the national championship, and it went as much as I predicted for college football. LSU won, and some would say dominated. And yeah, I know you do not sport, but it was nice to see the SEC win.
Yeah, all I heard from people all around me was that LSU won, and that's all I needed to hear.
That's all I needed to hear.
That's the context.
That would be the important news in the week, if not overshadowed, by the Oscars. Their nominations were put out, and that's what we're going to be talking about on today's show. So we're going to be talking about these nominations and our picks. So we'll be breaking down the major categories, not all of them, but the categories that we find are something to talk about and give our thoughts. And just as a preface, we have not seen all the movies on these lists. We do not know all the actresses or actors that are up for these awards, but we are going to discuss and just give what we think from the filthy casual side of things.
I'm going to judge these movies as harshly as I would if I had seen them, when in reality, I've only seen 2.
Now you're a real critic.
Yep.
You've done it. Speculation. But just a little bit of some housekeeping on this topic. This is the 92nd Academy Awards taking place on February 9th. And also keep in mind that the voting has already occurred. So, yeah, just by them announcing it, people aren't going to change their minds. It's already out there. So, and then there is no host again. Oh, what a bummer. No monologue like Ricky Gervais. We are truly missing out on potential.
So many potential memes.
Yes, and all gone. And then Joker is leading the nomination pack with 11 nominations.
Yeah, and so one thing I found really interesting was that, and just going back and doing a little research and watching other podcasts about this, so since 2000, the majority of the films that have walked in with the most nominations have not won Best Picture. Because you would think if it's getting nominated so many times and has so much support behind it, it's probably an overall pretty great film. So to see, I mean, probably 75% of the movies since 2000 not actually win Best Picture was just really interesting to me.
Yeah, it is interesting, but Joker might be leading the nomination pack, and we'll get to it later. But I do not think it'll win Best Picture. I'm
No,
already in
probably
the
not.
corner of the majority of films that are not getting it, that are had the most nominations. So we'll start with this isn't really a major category, but because you and I love music, being classically trained in certain music or certain instruments, we're going to talk about the best original score, and we're also going to talk about what was nominated from the and what won at the Golden Globes. Rather, Joker won best original score at the Golden Globes, and let's go with our picks right here. And I'll start off. Out of the nominees, which is Joker, Little Woman, Marriage Story, 1917, and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, I picked 1917, and this is a movie I saw last week. And even though I love John Williams, I have to say this score made me like I was shook after this movie, and it really does come down to the score, doing such an incredible job of connecting you to this movie. And at the same time, for those of you who have not seen 1917, there is a scene, no spoilers, there is one scene where the music grips you, and it is the closest thing to the finale of an orchestral piece that you can get to. For those of you who know music, and for those of you who have seen this movie, you know what scene I am talking about, where you are just overcome with horns and just the beauty of this score taken in the landscape that it is, shot at the time of day it is. It is fantastic. And I think that scene alone steals this category.
I mean, that's a pretty great description. And I mean, just in hearing you talk about it, I cannot wait to find some time to watch this movie.
Yes, if you're going to see this movie, see it for this scene alone, because it is a cinematic masterpiece of a scene.
So I guess just to go ahead and jump into my pick, I mean, I don't know if this is just like the dweeb kind of pick, but I'm going to go ahead and say Skywalker is going to win. I mean, so John Williams is up for his 52nd nomination, breaking his own record, which is crazy to me. He's been in the game this long, and he's gotten nominated that many times. And to be honest, man, I think with the name like John Williams and the history and the weight that comes with that, I think he's going to win because of name recognition and just the feeling of when you hear the name John Williams, all of the movies that you've connected with since you were a child just come rushing back, just like with Jaws, with all the Star Wars, obviously, with Indiana Jones, these major players. I think that's going to help influence the decision a bit. So yeah, my pick is Star Wars.
Yeah, we'll have to see how Hollywood picks in that. And no discredit to John Williams. He is a fantastic composer and has been a huge influence in my life and yours as well. So I do understand that pick very much. If I was to give a number two, it probably would be Rise of Skywalker, despite what the Golden Globes say.
Yeah.
Despite them. The next category, Best Cinematography. Of the nominees, The Irishman, Joker, The Lighthouse, 1917, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. John, who you got for this?
I'm going to go ahead and say 1917. I mean, because when you think cinematography, you think the way a film is shot, the way it all comes together, and just the craft of it. And because of that, I'm gonna say 1917 because of its one-shot style, and being, I mean, the fact that to take a whole feature-length film and to weave it together in that way, I think takes an incredible amount of skill to begin with. But then, with all the hype that this film has had behind it, with what critics and fans are saying,
What I have said about it.
specifically what you have said about it, I mean, I think that it's really going to set itself apart from the pack. And you look at its competitors, where I mean, The Irishman, there's a lot of good things behind it. Martin Scorsese is a great director. Joker, I think cinematography wise, it's not really that special. I think it's a good film, but to win over all of these other films, I think would be a stretch for that. Same thing with The Lighthouse.
I think The
And
Lighthouse is probably second in this category as far as like what you've described. I think Lighthouse is the one that comes runner up to 1917.
I don't know, because then I've read things about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and to see the things that Quentin Tarantino has done with his movies and the way that he's able to take any style and tweak it and craft it into his own and reproduce it in such an authentic way. Like I heard an interview about just breaking down the interview that he does between Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio and the interviewer. And in the original style from that time period, they would set up one camera, aim it at the interviewer, record all of the questions, stop, flip the camera, go to the actors or the interviewee, and basically read off the questions and record their answers. And seeing that it cut together the way it is, it completely reproduces that authentic style. So I think he's got a really strong craft behind his films, which just in the way that films are made, at least I think his probably comes closest to what 1917 does, as a craft at least.
Yeah, I don't know. Like from Once Upon a Time with Quentin Tarantino, most of the cinematography to me, as far as how everything is shot, is kind of similar. But I do see there was that one shot in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I was very impressed by. Was when they were filming a scene within this movie, and you see how the camera pans on Leo's face when he's talking to the lead actor in this movie, and then they screw up. So the camera has to roll back, like it has to move around in the shot to where where his speaking lines match with the camera. And it was really cool to see that. So I will give you that, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming probably second. For me, I would think Lighthouse. But my overall pick here for number one to steal this category is 1917, with Roger Deakins taking it home. Fantastic. The one-shot style you mentioned is part of that, but it is a flavor of cinematography I am not used to, and I want more of it. It was spectacular. The shots that they had done at night and even during the day, and how they shot it. They said like when they were filming and they have to do the one shot, like they would have to, the weather would change like every hour. So if it's cloudy and it starts to brighten up, they have to either hurry up with the shot or they have to wait till it becomes cloudy again to do it again.
Jeez.
Which is insane filming wise. But and Roger Deakins has already won for the same award for Blade Runner 2049. So I think you and I are very much in agreement. It is going to 1917 as it should.
Yes. The next category here, we've got Best Original Screenplay. So what was your pick for that category?
So my pick for this goes against what the Golden Globes said. Golden Globe said Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I am going against that. I am choosing Knives Out. The story never slows down. It's well crafted, and Rian Johnson does a great job with misdirection and setup. I think, even though I give like The Last Jedi a lot of critic from my mind as a huge Star Wars fan, Rian Johnson, wow. The way whoever he had on his team to make this story, it is so well crafted, and I really appreciate it. Even though I really did like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and there are some elements of it that are very original, I do think Knives Out is we have not seen a murder mystery done so well in a while. Better than the Murder on the Orient Express or whatever that was. A terrible movie. This was a thriller that I was not expecting. And I heard so many great things about it, and it's true. So that's why I'm saying it's taking away from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because we haven't seen this in a long time. Whereas with Quentin Tarantino, you know what you're going to get. And we've seen this kind of flavor before.
So, and just because we haven't mentioned it, and I want to quickly run through them. So, the nominees for this category have been Knives Out, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and the South Korean film Parasite. So, my pick, I'm going to have to go with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It won at the Golden Globes. I think it's got some momentum from that. And I mean, honestly, I think Hollywood likes to kind of pat itself on the back quite a bit. So
yeah.
when you have a movie about them and kind of this alt history setting from Quentin Tarantino, who already carries so much weight with his own name, I don't know, man. I could see it winning. I mean, so the problem is like so many of these movies are already so great, and there's not really any and there's not anybody in any of these categories really that if they won I would be upset by.
Yeah, I was just surprised that the Golden Globes didn't choose Parasite. I would think Parasite would be in number 2, but I guess you're right. They do want to pat themselves on the back.
Yeah, I mean honestly it could go any way. I mean Netflix is bringing some strong contenders with The Two Popes, with Marriage Story, with a few of their other The Irishman obviously. I think they are the studio that had the most nominations. When you think about it, a couple of years ago, people were asking like, how can Netflix possibly compete with all these major studios at the Oscars? And here they are bringing home the most nominations so far. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we will have to see how it goes. It's just one of those things that was surprising for me with Parasite. But yeah, I would... Golden Globes mostly predicts it, so your pick is much more sound than mine. I just really enjoyed Knives Out for what it was, and I really did like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was one of my top movies of last year. But as far as screenplay, it's just taking parts of history and just rewriting it, which could be seen as super original, but in my eyes, no. But then again, that's why I'm not part of the Academy.
Yeah. That reason alone.
The reason alone. But the next category changes it. We're going to Best Adapted Screenplay. And so of the nominees, there's The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Woman, and The Two Popes. And Golden Globes did not have a category for this, so there is no precedent yet. But as far as you, John, what did you pick?
So to be honest, I'm just going with the underdog. I think Jojo Rabbit's going to win it. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I think this movie is gaining enough traction slowly to be a real contender, and I think it's a really great story to begin with. That kind of puts, I don't want to say like a fun spin on that time period, because there's no real way to put a fun spin on that.
Fun spin.
But I think it makes it more accessible and introduces that whole of like everything that happened then in a new way, and in a much more connectable way. So like I said, I think I'm just going with the underdog. I'm going to pick Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah. I was just, when you said in a fun way, in my mind instantly like went to this one scene where I started crying because it was so sad. And I was just like, that's not fun. Wait, did you see Jojo Rabbit by any chance?
No, I have not.
Oh, it hurts.
I know.
Jojo Rabbit was so good. But I'm going to go with The Irishman on this, just because I think Hollywood loves Martin Scorsese. And that's the only reason I'm giving. Is that they're just like, thank you for taking down Marvel. Claps hands. You know, they'll never be in our categories. Marvel sucks. You are our champion. So I'll take The Irishman on this.
That's fair.
It's as simple as I'll make it.
Well, then, going on to the next category, we've got Best Supporting Actress. And Laura Dern won for Marriage Story at the Golden Globes.
Mm-hmm.
But the contenders are Kathy Bates for Richard Jewell, Laura Dern for Marriage Story, Scarlett Johansson for Jojo Rabbit, Florence Pugh for Little Women, and Margot Robbie for Bombshell. So who do you think is going to take it?
So, I have not seen all of these movies, and I did see Jojo Rabbit. That's the only movie I saw on this list. But I have seen clips of Laura Dern in Marriage Story, and I'm actually going to sit down and watch it on Netflix within the
Yes.
next week, so I can get better, so I could actually watch it because I heard it's so good. I heard Adam Driver is amazing, and Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson is in that movie too, and Laura Dern's character is supposed to be really good. And so I'm gonna have to go with the Golden Globes pick on this as Laura Dern. Even though I did see Jojo Rabbit and everyone loves Scarlett Johansson, it was a great performance, a fantastic performance, but I don't think it's one that is deserving of Best Supporting Actress. She does not get a lot of screen time, enough to be impactful like Brad Pitt is as the Best Supporting Male Actor in a movie. That's my pick. What's your pick?
I mean, I'm going to go with the same thing. Laura Dern for Marriage Story. To be honest, I haven't seen any of the movies in this category, so I can't really judge it that well. But I mean, just knowing her, knowing the things that people have been saying about that movie as a whole, and then looking at the contenders, I think Kathy Bates is really incredible as an actress, but I don't know about the Clint Eastwood movie as a whole. And then,
Controversial, that's all we know.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like the rest of these movies that have come out are so good. Like I said, like it could really go to anybody, and I think it would be justified. But I think my gut says Laura Dern.
Yeah, Laura Dern does it. Might do it again. The fantastic Laura Dern. No purple hair. No purple hair.
That's probably for the best.
Probably for the best. Okay, Best Supporting Actor. For this category, Brad Pitt won for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at the Golden Globes. And of the nominees, you have Tom Hanks in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Anthony Hopkins for The Two Popes, Al Pacino for The Irishman, Joe Pesci for The Irishman, and Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And John, I'll ask you, what is your pick for this category?
So I think Brad Pitt is going to take it, and I'll tell you why. Because Al Pacino and Joe Pesci are both incredible, but I think because they're both coming from the same movie, it's going to split the voters. And I don't know that The Two Popes has enough traction for this category. And I think Tom Hanks could take it for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, but I think for what that movie was, I think Brad Pitt's going to have to take it home. Otherwise, I think either Al Pacino or Joe Pesci could have taken it if it was just one of them being nominated. But I think with both of them, it kind of muddies the water a bit.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel you on that one. Because when we were going over this, I literally could not decide between Al Pacino and Joe Pesci. I wanted to choose one of those two, but ultimately, because of that, I went with Brad Pitt.
Exactly, and I think the rest of the voters are going to do the same.
Yeah, like it was so hard to choose between the two. I really wanted to pick Joe Pesci, but you brought up the good point that it's probably going to split the votes because people, Hollywood will be like Martin Scorsese, our hero. But I do think Brad Pitt will win it, but I want Joe Pesci to win.
That's fair.
Just if I'm being honest.
And see, there again, like anybody could win it, and not everybody would be mad. And I think that just says a lot about the types of movies being made this year and the people that are making them. There's a lot of really good contenders out there.
Yeah, I would very much. I would agree with you on that. Yeah.
So then the next category is Best Director. Sam Mendes for 1917 already took it home for the Golden Globes. But the contenders in this one are The Irishman, Martin Scorsese, Joker, Todd Phillips. 1917 has Sam Mendes, obviously. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino. And Parasite, Bong Joon-ho is that director.
Good job.
Thank you. I've heard it a bunch from other videos, so I know how to say it. Don't you judge me. So who do you think is going to go ahead and take it?
My pick goes to Sam Mendes with 1917. Sam Mendes, keeps on refining and keeps on getting his style perfected. And the way he directed this movie was incredibly honest and frightening. And it felt real. And that is what movies are all about, telling a story. And the way he told this story was, I think, a great tribute that he had done. And at the end of the movie, you'll see who he tributes this to. I won't really spoil that. I don't think it should be spoiled because a lot of people connect with it in a certain way. Why he wrote this story and did this movie. I love the way him and Roger Deakins commanded the actors and the actors to give their performances in this movie. There were things that I saw actors doing that you didn't see in war movies, like Saving Private Ryan, like Band of Brothers, like The Pacific. Just going down the line, there were just shots of people. No, I'll just say it right now. There are shots of people like hysterically crying, not getting to words, and it hits you in the heart, man. I think Sam Mendes hands down deserves this. So what's your choice for this?
Man, I was gonna say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but just after hearing everything that you've been saying about it, you have convinced me.
No,
I'm gonna.
I got you to switch.
I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon and I'm gonna say 1917.
If you have been listening to this podcast and you haven't thought maybe I should see 1917, change your mind and make it a definitely.
And that brings us to a great segment. Today's sponsor is 1917.
Yes, Sam Mendes dishing out the big money for us. Yes, 1917 sponsor this podcast. Not really.
Man, if we had the Sam Mendes money, we wouldn't have to do this.
If we had the Sam Mendes money and it was all about just promoting 1917, I would jump on that bandwagon so quick.
Yep.
Sign me up.
Anyways, so next category is Best Actress, and Renee Zellweger for Judy took that home for the Golden Globes. Why don't you go ahead and tell us who the contenders are in this category?
You just don't want to say the first one.
Man, how you know so well.
Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story. Saoirse Ronan for Little Woman. Am I wrong?
Yep. Saoirse.
Man, you know what? I'm allowed. I got one wrong.
There we go.
Crucify me. Charlize Theron for Bombshell, and then Renee Zellweger for Judy. And I'll just go ahead and just say what my pick was, because it's a cop-out. Once again, I did not see all of these movies, but I'm going to take Renee Zellweger with Judy, because that is what the Golden Globes is going with. And I'm going to finger gun my way all the way with the Golden Globes on this one.
I mean, look, man, that's not a bad answer.
Yeah.
She's already a winner, so
yeah,
that's justified.
Well, Charlize Theron has already... actually, did she win for her role in Monster?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Neither do I. But I know Monster did win Best Director for Patty Jenkins, I think.
Sure.
When it came out. Charlize Theron is amazing. So, yeah.
So that brings me to my pick, which happens to be Charlize Theron for Bombshell. I've seen some clips from it. I've seen some interviews that she's done, and just in kind of seeing what she's done to this role. I mean, like, she really transformed into Megyn Kelly, and it's crazy to see, just to compare the two and how realistic she was for this. And honestly, I mean, in today's political climate, I think it was the right movie to come out at the right time. I think it tells the right story, and it was a really important message to get out there. And so for that reason, it just kind of the perfect storm of everything coming together. I think she's going to take it.
Yeah, I think you have a good pick in Charlize Theron. She's fantastic. Also known as Mama Spicy in Hot Ones.
Oh my gosh.
And I think your kids call her Mama Spicy is what it is from that interview. She's great.
Oh, that's so good.
The next category is for Best Actor, with Joaquin Phoenix winning for Joker at the Golden Globes. And the nominees are Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory, Leonardo DiCaprio for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm always tripping over that. I don't know why.
It's a long title.
It is a long title. Come on, Quentin, help me out. Adam Driver in Marriage Story, Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, and then Jonathan Pryce in The Two Popes. And I think I can go ahead and say it. Both you and I picked Joaquin Phoenix in this one.
We did. But I want to ask you a question that I don't know how controversial this might be. So, obviously, Joaquin Phoenix did a great job in this movie. But if we didn't have the Nolan trilogy or Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker, do you think this movie would still have the same kind of cultural significance that it did? And do you think that Phoenix's performance would be so widely revered as it is? Or do you think it's just riding coattails from Heath Ledger?
That's a really interesting question. I think that I think this movie would have cultural significance because it is taking, even though it's trying to be more realistic than the comic books, kind of like the Nolan trilogy did, and even though it's kind of a copycat of a Taxi Driver, I would say that the impact of the message about mental health and how Joaquin Phoenix portrayed it is really kind of its own thing. Regardless, if Heath Ledger played the Joker or didn't play the Joker, if the Nolan trilogy happened or if it didn't happen, I do think that Joaquin Phoenix would still be in this prestigious spot. I still think he would get nominated for his role because you got to think Jared Leto played Joker in Suicide Squad and was such an awful showing that this complete going from like a 2 out of 10 to a 10 on an actor and performance scale is worthy of getting the nominee. And Phoenix is a fantastic actor. I don't think anybody can go ahead and discredit him for that. He's amazing. And I don't want it to be that the Nolan trilogy does take away from it. I hope no one's thinking that, because watching the movie is a great character study. And it's kind of like Taxi Driver. Once again, copycat. But anyone who's saying that, I hope they saw the movie and they're not just critiquing, playing armchair quarterback on this.
Oh, yeah. No, I'd agree. That's kind of the discussion I wanted to get from that question. I think that if we didn't have Heath Ledger's performance, we probably would be saying Joaquin Phoenix is like the penultimate Joker, and he is kind of the example that I think we're going to have going forward.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this: who is of the two who played between Joaquin and Heath Ledger? Who do you think who is your favorite Joker? Not saying who's the better actor, who's the better Joker, just who's your favorite.
I would have to still go with Heath Ledger. Simply because I do believe that you can tell a Joker story without Batman, but I think that it amplifies the performance to have that Batman and Joker playing off of each other in the way that they did, and in just the way that Ledger fully became that character, I think, in a way, and really I did, to be honest, man, when I saw it for the first time, I did not recognize Heath Ledger at all. I had no idea who that was. And he just fully became this other person.
I still can't recognize him in that movie.
No, it's crazy, man. His voice changed, his appearance changed, everything changed. And he really committed to it. And I think in just the way that he personified chaos, but there were so many subtleties to the character and so many things that you could theorize about his backstory, about who he was. And the fact that we're still talking about it so many years later, I think is a really great indicator about it.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, and I would also take Heath Ledger in this, just because, man, Joaquin's descent into chaos is so, it's so real and visceral. There's parts of the movie where it was just cringing, and I hate cringe material. I really do, and that's what I'm still in the theater watching this movie. It was a good movie, and his performance was really, really good. Obviously, he's getting nominated, but it's something about just meeting a character who's just chaotic in nature and just doing it not for money, not for goals, just to see chaos. That was more compelling for me looking at Heath Ledger. It was definitely more of a force of evil than a force of descent into evil.
Yeah, more afflicted by his environment than who he was at the core. So I guess the last category here we're going to talk about is Best Picture, and 1917 won won at the Golden Globes. So
For
the
so 1917 won as the drama, Best
that's right,
Picture in
that's
a
right,
drama in the Golden Globes, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood won for musical or comedy
that's
Best
right.
Picture.
Thank you
Yeah,
for the clarification.
it's such a weird thing that they do, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah. So the contenders in this category are Ford v Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. So one thing that I found interesting too was Parasite was so it's obviously an international film, and this is the first time that an international film has been nominated for the second consecutive year in a row for Best Picture at the Oscars. Which I think it just says a lot about the types of movies that people are seeking out now, and how we're kind of growing as a society, and letting all these other influences come in. And I don't know. I just thought that was really cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing more kind of diversity like that in the future. So
Yeah, it is. It is a really cool fact to see that more international films are entering this category. Which what is it? There's like 9 nominees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 nominees, and the max is supposed to be 10. So we got a really stacked year for 2019 when you think about Best Picture. And I would agree. I think this is a great year for films.
yeah. So who do you think is gonna take Best Picture?
Before we hear my pick, let's hear from our sponsor, 1917, sponsoring the podcast today, who actually, ironically, happens to be my pick. Yes, 1917. I loved, and to give some background, I loved Ford versus Ferrari, and I loved Jojo Rabbit. If you want to ask me who I thought my nominee for Best Picture would have been at the end of December, I would have easily said Ford versus Ferrari. However, after seeing 1917, man, easily the best picture, and it's because it's better than the sum of its parts, and its parts are pretty damn good. You talk about the score, you talk about the cinematography, the screenplay, and the actors that they get to portray certain emotions, to watch the feat of a stylistic one shot in a movie try and be done. You could tell, like, oh, this is one shot. They have like a CGI tree move over, pan in front of the thing, even though to signify that, oh, it's not really one shot, but it's shot like that. It's so unique, and it's put in a war movie. You could have done it with something else. You could have been like, what is it, Michael Keaton's Birdman?
Yeah, that was the other thing that was coming to mind about the last major one-shot movie like that.
Yeah, this takes it to an extreme with explosions, gunfire, and really haunting, tense moments. It has to be, for me, 1917.
I mean, I think that's a great pick. And to be honest, I'm going to go ahead and say that I have been completely influenced by you. And my pick for this will also be 1917. I think, like you said, I think it's going to be the best overall movie. And just, again, man, like literally any of these movies in this category could win and I wouldn't be mad, which it's just crazy. But I definitely think 1917 is going to take it.
Yeah, it's so tough because Jojo Rabbit hit me in the heart. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It got me through a lot of emotions. Ford versus Ferrari made me feel like a kid again because of the kind of nostalgia and my love of the Ford GT. So that was what the flavor was at. And even like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was hilarious in a great way to see someone like Brad Pitt and Leo feed off each other, the story and the ending, the way it kind of like lands in their laps. A great story. But 1970 did everything though all the three of those movies did. And there's a little bit of comedy in 1917. It's situational comedy. It's in the beginning. So it hits on all those points for me. I just don't. I can't say anything bad about this movie. I can't see a movie that is better than this.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I think if we had taken these movies individually and just put them 2 years ago, just put it on its own, let it compete with the other movies back then, I think any one of these movies would have won if it didn't have to compete with the rest of them. And again, Netflix has two of these nominations. It's got The Irishman and Marriage Story. So I think that's saying a lot about the kind of content that Netflix has been putting out, especially for award season. But I mean, I'm really curious. I don't know, man. Like I've said it on the podcast before. Like I don't really fully buy into the Golden Globes and the Oscars. I think it's just ways that studios make money off of the actors' talent in other ways. Like they get paid for for the movies, the performance there, and then they get
It's
paid
a Hollywood
for
circle jerk.
Yes, it really is. But I am genuinely curious to see which one of them takes this category, just with all the competition that it has.
Yeah, and I have to say, if it's not 1917, it ends up being Parasite, I'm still okay with that. And that would actually be a huge accomplishment for, still for Netflix, Or not for Netflix. Parasite is the international one. Oh,
Yes.
let's just give it all to Netflix. No, if Netflix wins with The Irishman or Little Woman or Marriage Story, I think that's a huge feat. But Parasite winning, we've seen international movies win in other categories. Did Roma won Best Picture?
No, no.
I'm
Not
thinking
only
of at the
since
Golden
2000.
Globes it won.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that you seeing the diversity that we've seen this year as far as movies. I think this is a great time for cinema, and even though you don't agree with the Oscars and Golden Globes, I kind of agree with you that it's not like the greatest things, but it's fun to look back. For me, it's fun because it gets us to look back at what we saw.
Speaking of what we have seen, I want to ask you, what are you watching, Chris?
So I'm watching. So I got connected with a Netflix account. So I am watching. I wanted to watch The Witcher because I went over to visit my parents, and they had The Witcher on, and I was like, "This is the video games, the books. It's based off the books mostly." And I was kind of I was watching it. It wasn't the first episode; it was like the fourth episode, and I wanted to watch it, and after seeing this episode, I was like, I really want to watch it now. So I'm going to start it. But what came on the suggested for me was Woo Assassins, and it's kind of like cheesy television, like Avatar, Chi, kind of like maybe a little bit of that Jackie Chan animated series when it's like with his uncle or whatever like that. One more thing. It's a weird culmination of like Chinese American West Coast fusion, and I don't know if I'm going to continue watching it because it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like American series television meeting Chinese movies, which in their own like weird niche markets is really weird. Like, Chinese movies can be very bizarre, just like TV series can also be weird. So, and I'm talking like sci-fi weird, not like it's Fargo. No, like Battlestar Galactica and the Badlands, Enter the Badlands, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just kind of odd. So, yeah. John, what are you watching?
Look, I don't even like admitting this. I'm not a fan of this director, but enough people at work have been pressuring me to watch this movie, and I'm like 45 minutes into it, and I'm watching Six Underground. It's Michael Bay, and like literally in the first 5 minutes, like I was overwhelmed by Bay. It's the most Michael Bay that I've ever seen Michael Bay get. And I can only handle it in like 15, 20-minute chunks. I'm tired.
Wow.
There's so many like quick cuts, so many unnecessary explosions. The color's all weird. There's random like flashes of light coming in out of nowhere. Ryan Reynolds is just basically being Deadpool in it. There's a bunch of like unnecessary blood in slow motion, and it's like I'm gonna finish it because I'm committed at this point. But I'm sorry, man. I feel like I've disappointed you.
It doesn't sound like you're committed enough.
I don't want to get any more committed than this.
Oh man, that sounds rough. But there's there's other stuff on Netflix. Are you planning to watch Marriage Story at some point?
I would like to, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm gonna need a palate cleanser after this movie.
Yeah, and then and you're married, so you might watch this movie and get more depressed after watching Six Underground. I don't know.
Sure, let's go with that.
It's a sad story from the preview I watched on Netflix. I was like, oh my god, like I feel like this movie's gonna make me cry. And as a child of two divorced parents, like I'm like, damn, divorces, it's rough.
It is rough. Yeah, well, maybe by next week I'll have seen it and we can talk about it then.
Yeah, we'll see. On that depressing note, thank you for listening to the Summon Up podcast, and we'll see you next week.
That was a great segue out. Bye, guys.
There's the happiness. Bye.